Hi Vikram, how are you?
Hi, very well. Sorry, just trying to connect properly.
Yeah. Let's just troubleshoot the tech stuff.
No? Okay, so should I go down now? Okay. When are we going live?
We'll give it a couple of minutes. So just I mean you're live with me. We're live, but if you want to set it up and just check
Yeah,
your
I'm just going to go
audio and all.
downstairs. I'm just going to go downstairs where the Wi-Fi connection is better. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.
Okay, great. Oh, nice green.
Yeah, but I'm in Goa actually.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to talk to you about that. I hope we get a view of your bee
I'm actually,
box.
yeah, that's why. In fact, I'm just going down so we're close to that.
Okay. For everyone who's joined, we'll just give it a couple of minutes. Vikram is just setting himself up.
Yeah, sorry, it's five
No.
seconds.
Hi, Sujana. I can see that you're on.
Okay. No,
Make yourself, Vikram, make yourself comfortable and all of that. We've got.
You know, I'm just trying to see how I can actually do some gymnastics to make sure you see the bee hive.
You know what? If you can't keep it in the frame, maybe later on I can. You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
just point
I can't keep it in frame all the time. I just want to see if I can just show it at some point. Where does it? Can you see it now?
No, I see. Oh yeah, there it is. Is that it? Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so we'll just at one point we'll just do this. Meanwhile, I'll just sit properly at the moment.
Hi, Binny. I can see some familiar handles on the who have joined. My mother is on. That's nice. Okay, tell me, Vikram. Tell me when you're comfortable and
I'm ready. We can go now.
Okay, well it's 4:01. We'll give it a minute and then we can sort of begin because I think people are still logging on. Okay. What I've noticed with these live sessions is even though I'm always very prompt and you know, I find that people sometimes come on a little bit you know, a few minutes here and there.
Okay.
So we'll just wait for a few more people to join us and then we can get going.
Okay, this is the first time I'm doing this. How do I know how many people have joined? Oh, I can see on.
Yeah, it's on.
12 people
it's
so
on
far.
the top. Yeah, and
far.
then you know it gets recorded, so then it'll be. I think they'll probably upload it onto the website as well as on YouTube. So you know, for people who can't access it at this particular time.
Yeah.
So it's actually a great medium. It's a wonderful way to communicate. And what's nice about IG Live is, you know, people can ask questions as we're talking, which I'll sort of make sure that I have a note of. So, but you'll also see like the, you know, you can see the comments at the bottom, right? People are waving and saying hi and all that. So.
Okay, so getting some nicer backgrounds for you. Sorry, so how will we see the questions?
You know, so I mean, you and I'll be chatting, but as people are sort of engaged in the conversation, what they do is they write the questions at the bottom, and then the ones that are sort of, we may not be able to get to all the questions. It depends on the volume of questions, but you'll be able to see it too. Can you see like people have, like Pradeep is waving. Can you see that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So you'll be able to see, people can write in the comments. They can ask a question.
Okay.
So. Okay, so I think we should get going if you're okay with that.
I'm fine. Let's go.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Gayatri Rangachari Shah. I'm a journalist and author. Welcome to Under the Mango Tree's first Instagram live session. It's an exciting day for us because it is also World Bee Day. Some of you might be wondering why we need a day especially for bees. Well, without bees, 80% of the world's cultivated plants would disappear. Bees are vital to our natural world and to our food security. They are an essential part of our biodiversity. We're going to spend some time talking about that, but first let me update you on some exciting bee world developments. Over in England, bees got a human version of a queen bee and a touch of glamour when British royal Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, who's a huge bee lover, became president of Bees for Development, a major UK charity. And in India, the finance minister recently announced an allocation of 500 crores for beekeeping. That's a welcome step and will go a long way in helping to improve agriculture. Before I introduce our guest, Vikram Doctor, and my fellow board member, let me take a few minutes to talk to you about Under the Mango Tree Society, a non-profit founded in 2009 by our wonderful friend Vijaya Pastala to promote beekeeping in a holistic manner. Under the Mango Tree Society is one of the few organizations in the country working on indigenous bees, specifically Apis cerana indica and Trigona, which are stingless bees, to improve agricultural incomes for small farmers who comprise 86% of India's farms. UTMT Society works in tribal districts of Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh and has impacted 67,000 lives thus far. It works to train and educate people to keep bees at very little cost. Significantly, it's helped to enable women to become beekeepers, a line of work that they weren't encouraged to pursue earlier. Work done by Under the Mango Tree shows that if you place 2 bee boxes on a 1-acre farm growing vegetables, fruits, oilseeds, or pulses, that farm's productivity goes up from anywhere to 20 to 60% without doing anything else, just because of the pollination that bees do. That means a small farmer can make anywhere from 5,000 rupees to 20,000 rupees extra per farming cycle. It's no wonder we use the term busy as a bee. In 2013, UTMT won the World Bank's prestigious Development Marketplace Award for its innovative methods to reduce poverty using indigenous bees. And in March of this year, it won the HCL Foundation Award in the environmental category. It was a huge recognition for Under the Mango Tree's impact. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Sujana Krishnamurthy, who has steered this vital nonprofit for the last decade and has enabled it to thrive. Sujana is an incredible advocate for improving rural livelihoods, and her passion and commitment towards Under the Mango Tree, its vast network of field workers, and the farmers they support is testimony to the power of an individual to affect change. So on that note, a very happy World Bee Day. I'm delighted to be in conversation with my fellow board member, Vikram Doctor. Vikram is a well-known journalist and food connoisseur. His writings in the Economic Times are widely read, and his podcast, Real Food, have been widely heard. If you haven't heard it yet, I highly encourage you to do so. Vikram has been on the board of Under the Mango Tree Society for a decade, and he's nothing if not committed to the cause of bees. So Vikram, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Gayatri.
How are you?
No, it's really good to be able to do this. I mean that we're able to do this on World Bee Day, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Though I think what's really more important for us is what you just mentioned, the finance minister's huge stimulus package,
Right.
specifically for beekeeping. It's a very welcome sign of recognition from the government that beekeeping is important. There are unfortunately problems, potentially, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's really a good time to be talking about bees.
So you, Vikram, are in Goa, right?
Yeah, I'm in Goa at the moment, which is actually quite a good place to be for in general, and also for bees, because because it's fairly semi-rural area, so we have a lot of bees around. And in fact, I'm going to just get up for a minute and show a beehive that was actually just started being built exactly for a bee swarm just settling outside this window. And in 1 month they built a full bee comb. These are probably Apis florea. They're not the bees that we work with. These are very small dwarf bees, but it's a pretty beautiful hive. I hope I'm going to be able to show this.
These are bee box. They just came and
Did you get to see it?
I found it.
I should try and shoot you again.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah, I saw it briefly.
Yeah. So that's sort of bee box bee. It's a wild bee that builds the sort of circular combs that you just saw.
Right.
but it's a very good pollinator. And that's something that UTMT believes very strongly in, that the main focus of beekeeping is not honey, which is what most people think it is, but actually pollination.
So, talk to us a little bit about that because there's World Bee Day, and I wouldn't have known that we had a World Bee Day only came around last year. Why is it important to mark a day for bees? People think of tigers and rhinos as animals that need to be saved, but bees are really not elevated in the kind of the consciousness of the public. Why do we need to have a World Bee Day?
Yeah, so okay, this actual World Bee Day is actually itself a bit of a jugaad, because the best I've been able to discover about its origins, it's because Slovenia, the tiny little European country, lobbied hard with the United Nations and got it recognized as World Bee Day, because apparently there is some Slovenian pioneer of bees in the 18th century. Now, not very much is known about this guy, but it's one of these national pride things. But that's fine, because for two reasons. I mean, one, it suits us in India, because summer, like now, is actually the main season for when bees build their hives and store honey. I mean, essentially, the bees are doing it before the monsoon, because monsoon is the lean season for bees, just like for human beings. So they need the
Right.
honey to last them through the monsoon. So this is actually the main season for the bees to collect honey, and of course, in due course, for humans to harvest it. I mean, the second reason why it's important is because, I mean, what the little I've been able to find out about the guy, the Slovenian guy, World Bee Day is named after, is that he's said to have pioneered the creation of of bee boxes, which is what under the mango tree, helps develop and in rural areas. And that's really important, because humans have a very, very ancient history with bees. I mean, you can see even in India, in the Deccan, there are tribal rock paintings showing bee harvesting. You can clearly see these little stick figures trying to break those gigantic. You must have seen below, like bridges and things like that. These huge beehives get created by rock bees, basically, which are among the
Right.
largest bees in the world. Uh, and uh, and so this tradition of harvesting honey is very ancient. There are many references, to bees in, like, in Indian mythology and so on. But all this is basically collecting these honey from the wild. Or in Europe, there was a sort of tradition that grew of people could watch bees, and they realized how at some point they swarm, which is what happens when when a new queen is formed within a hive, and she leaves the hive along with a bunch of workers and sets up a new hive. That's basically
Right.
how beehives propagate themselves. So humans observed this, and they realized that if they had a pot or something handy, they could catch a swarm and get the bees to build their beehives, and that which made collecting the honey easier. So a certain level of honey, honey keeping, beekeeping developed. Unfortunately, what all these methods involve destroying the hive and
Right.
to extract the honey. Um, and this may not have been seen as a problem at that time. It is a problem today, when one of the biggest issues in food has become our relations with animals and how we deal with them. Um, and the one thing about bee boxes is that they allowed you to extract honey without killing the bees. Basically, the bee boxes that developed over time, and here the key person is actually not a Slovenian, but an American, a guy called Louis Langstroth, who in the 19th century developed the modern bee box as we see it, which is like a sort of rectangular cube with these little slots. It's like a filing cabinet. You put in these slots, and within each sort of frame, the bees will build the honeycomb. And so to extract it, you just need to, like, open the top of the bee box, obviously wearing protection. I mean, it's really ironic when I see all these COVID workers wearing PPE protection. I keep thinking, oh my God, those are beekeepers, because the beekeepers wear the same sort of protection. So basically, wearing protection, you take off one frame, and there is a method of carefully extracting the honey without damaging the comb, without killing the bees. I mean, it's one thing that UTMT actively tries to help beekeepers do. I mean, it's a very neat little device that we give to our beekeepers. It's totally manual. It's like a big stainless steel cylinder with a sort of revolving arrangement inside. we take up the bee frame out of the beehive, fit it inside, and there's, like you're churning butter. You very carefully turn the wheel, and the frame spins, and the honey spins out of the frame, but the frame is not damaged. In fact, even the honeycomb is not damaged. And then we just take it out once the honey is extracted, put it back in the beehive, and the bees fill it up with honey. And of course, responsible beekeepers will never take all the honey out of the hive. We have to keep enough honey for the bees, because the bees themselves eat the honey. And this sort of arrangement, which really developed with beekeeping on the model that these European beekeepers developed, allows you to keep bees and without actually killing them, and
Right.
allowing them. So in a sense, it's an ideal relationship between humans and animals, because even in all the other relationships we have with animals for food, the animal is killed at some point. You can say that you will only eat eggs but not chicken, but the chicken will be killed at some point. You can only
Right.
drink milk, but you won't eat beef, but the cow will probably still be killed at some point. And this matters a lot today, because a lot of people are asking, how can we build a food system based on this sort of cruelty to animals? I mean, I know, are also really interested in these sort of vegan issues, right? And this was something that worried you when you became involved with these.
So I actually wanted to ask you, obviously bees and honeys are, they're so, they're just codependent. That's how we associate bees with honey. But I think that one thing that we're also working towards is trying to uncouple that bees
Yes,
are much more than just providers of honey. And so,
absolutely.
Vikram, if you could talk a little bit about that, because I know one thing that, when the finance minister announced the 500 crore package, is I know that a lot of people, sort of tweeted and did social media around the fact that this is a big thing for honey. But actually, we want to try to step away from that a little bit, right? Could you talk to us a little about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, as I said, a lot of thanks are due to the finance minister for recognizing that beekeeping is important. But unfortunately, some of the responses that people gave were exactly as you said. For instance, the head of the Khadi Village Industries Commission said that this is going to be a sweet kranti, a sweet revolution in India. And I think many of us at UTMT were just saying, like, no, 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 this is not the way to think about beekeeping. The problem with this sort of approach and looking at honey as the main reason for beekeeping is that that's not true. The biggest
Right.
reason for beekeeping by far is pollination. And this is something that Under the Mango Tree has been saying right from the start. I mean, people, are very familiar with the Under the Mango Tree honey, and it's amazing honey. But that's not the main thing that we exist for. There are many people who produce honey. Our focus is pollination, and you gave some of the figures earlier. And if anybody who's listening to this is interested, we can show you the studies. We have commissioned studies from independent researchers, and basically the way it's done is, we put bee boxes in one field and another field without bee boxes, but the same crops, and we see the differing level of production, and it is really startling. I mean, it mainly happens with vegetables, with dals, with vegetables and dals, and it can be truly remarkable. I remember there was one study which showed us something like a 400% increase for cluster beans. That was extreme, but in
Right.
every case, we see a huge increase in pollination where a bee box is put, and not just any bee box, but Apis cerana, the Indian bee that we
The
work with.
indigenous, yes.
And and there's a very important reason. Right from the start, Under the Mango Tree has been committed to working with Indian bees, and that's the big difference between us and commercial beekeeping. Between the government, most of the government efforts at promoting beekeeping, is that they work with Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee. Okay, it's a bit like this is a comparison that Vijay Pastala, who started Under the Mango Tree, uses often. It's a very good comparison. It's like how the dairy industry has been forced
Right.
to use
The
imported
Jersey cow.
cows,
Right.
Holstein Friesians, and things like that. And the thing about them is they're milk producing machines. They produce huge amounts of milk, but that comes at a real cost. I mean, these imported cows require special fodder. They require special accommodation, which is really crippling for the dairy farmers. They tend to fall sick more often, so they have to be pumped with antibiotics, which eventually make their way into the milk. So
Right.
there's a huge movement now to promote native cows. And it's exactly the same with beekeeping. The imported European honeybees, they are honey production powerhouses. They produce honey like crazy, okay? but they only work with a few crops. Which is why they are best suited to, like, say, orchards in Punjab and Himachal, where there is just one type of crop, which is suited to the honeybee. That's where honeybee cultivation does make sense, because the bees pollinate. They're specialist pollinators,
Right.
but they don't work with a broad range of crops that we have on most farms in India. Apis cerana and most of the other bees that we work with, like Trigonella and a few others, or even the Apis florea that I just showed you out there, are fantastic pollinators. They pollinate across plants. And the big problem with looking at honey as the metric for beekeeping success is that obviously you're going to go for Apis mellifera, because that's the honey production powerhouse. And again, we have seen in these 10 years that we've been trying to promote beekeeping, and that we try to interact with government beekeeping systems or with commercial beekeepers, is that because their metric is only honey production, they just go to Apis mellifera, which is not a good pollinator. So the real purpose of beekeeping is being completely lost in this whole intense focus on honey. And
Right.
so we really hope that, the government in this beekeeping stimulus that it's done will listen to organizations like UTMT and tell, beekeepers that the main metric is not honey production. Honey production is great. That's an excellent excellent side product.
Byproduct. Right.
Wax is a great side product. There are a whole range of other side products that you can get from bees. But the main thing is pollination.
Right. So let me ask you this. Presumably, these farmers have a deep knowledge of the land and would have a deep sense of, have a great idea in terms of the importance of pollination by bees. And yet we hear about bees being in danger or resistance towards placing bee boxes. I'm sort of, why is that disconnect there? Where did the messaging, or where did the importance of bees to kind of improving farm yield and farm productivity get lost?
See, I mean, it's not that bees are the only pollinators. There are other pollinators which do a decent job of pollination. So many farmers just, go with that. Um, uh, there, there's not been a long-term tradition of beekeeping with Apis cerana, with Indian bees, but there were always bees around. So farmers will tell you, yeah, there are bees, Apis cerana, Apis florea, which I just showed you, rock bees, and those. So farmers are usually aware that there is some link, but they don't realize how powerful it can be.
Right.
It's when an organization like UTMT goes there and shows them the impact that bee boxes can have, that even farmers become say, oh wow. I mean, in the villages that we work with, there's, you talk to farmers and they're really amazed at the difference that a bee box can make. I mean, the problem is because it's not part of it's not a part of the government agricultural extension system. Uh, this is just not talked about to farmers. So
Right.
another problem, for example, is that yeah, farmers traditionally would keep seeds. They would keep allow some of their produce to produce seeds, which they would then keep to like sow for the next crop. Now, the
Right.
problem with doing that is for various complicated reasons that often leads to a reduction in production over time if you keep using the same seeds. And what has happened now is that there are these big seed companies which are telling farmers, and very aggressively marketing to farmers, saying like, don't keep like the old seed, just buy our new hybrid seeds, obviously because it's good business for them. And the farmers, say yes, okay, at least that's one way of keeping up production. What they don't realize is that if you save your seeds and you combine it with using bee boxes like we have, you can actually increase the yield, considerably. And
Right.
this is the sort of knowledge that is not being told to farmers, mainly because it doesn't suit the aims of the agricultural,
Lobby.
scientific establishment, which
Yeah.
is wedded to honey production. And of course, it
Right.
doesn't suit the interest of the seed companies who want the farmers to buy seeds.
Right. And tell me something, are the indigenous bees, are they under threat? Because, we also hear that there are 25 to 35,000 different species of bees. So given that kind of a statistic, is there any chance that these local bees are sort of not, are really facing a threat to their existence?
See, globally, there is a problem with bees. Okay, globally, there are two or three problems that happened with honeybees in particular. One is an outbreak of certain type of infestations, specifically a type of infestation called varroa. These are like parasites that come and wreck a hive. The larger issue is a very complicated disease called colony collapse disorder, which does exactly that. Suddenly, uh, uh, bees, a beehive is a very complex social structure, and suddenly it breaks down. Like, as you can see, like I guess like cities like today when hit with something like COVID, where social systems just break down, and suddenly you find that the hives are empty. Now, people didn't. This has been spreading across the world, and people didn't really understand why it was happening. A lot of research has gone into colony collapse disorder, and increasingly it seems that there's one type of pesticide called neonicotinoids, which are promoted hugely by companies like Bayer. Uh, and one effect of these neonicotinoids is that they seem to scramble up uh, bees' mental system so that they don't know how to get back to the hives, and as a consequence of which the hives just collapse. So there's an increasing movement in Europe to ban some of these pesticides. Unfortunately, that has barely caught on in India so far. Um, Having said that, this is not yet, I think, a severe issue in India. Yes, there are problems. I mean, bees. We are seeing the effects of climate change, of heat, and bees are definitely being affected by that. I mean, in a country where there are places where temperatures are going about 45 to 50, that's definitely going to affect bees. I mean, I think people don't realize that, one thing that when you see a bee box, you can hear a sort of a hum inside of the bees, beating their wings all the time. And one reason they do that is to keep the bee box cool. There are bees that just beat their wings to help. I mean, I'm simplifying greatly, but they to keep the bee box cool, simply because if temperatures go too high, wax starts melting, and it can affect the bee boxes. So yeah, I mean, I don't think India is in as bad a position as it is in the West, where colony collapse disorder has been really devastating beekeeping. But we are not banning. There's been no discussion on looking at new nicotinoids in India, and they're widely available. You go to any farmer shop in any rural area, and you'll see these products available. And it's very likely that this is going to start happening on large scale in India too.
Now, so you're saying that pesticides,
Certain
which
kinds of
obviously
one class of
as a
pesticides.
pesticides
Yeah.
is poses a threat to bees, and you see that problem maybe being enhanced in a country like India, even
Yeah.
though that hasn't yet happened. Now, one thing that UTMT Society has done is that they've made some significant inroads in terms of enabling women to become beekeepers,
Absolutely.
tribal women, and I'd
Yeah.
like you
Absolutely.
to talk to us a little bit about that because. I mean, even someone like me or people like, sort of watching right now, I mean, bees are, whether you're a man or a woman, bees are also something that human beings are a little bit wary of because they're wary of being stung. So how did that happen? And could you talk to us a little about how you were able to, how the society was able to get women on board?
It's very interesting when you talk to beekeepers, because they have a really interesting relationship with bees. I mean, it's true that any people who work closely with animals, cow herds or goat herds, or whatever, have a special relationship with animals. But with bees in particular, I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Because bees are both wild and not wild. I mean, cows are not wild, right? They're domesticated. We have complete control over a cow.
Right.
Bees are not really under our control. After all, we capture a swarm by persuading it to come into a bee box, but there's nothing to stop the swarm from escaping, and there's nothing that a beekeeper can stop them doing. So in a sense, I think what you really get with beekeepers is that it's not a master slave relationship. It's really a partnership between
Mhm.
humans and bees, which is quite unique. With most other cases of animals that we have with us, we are clearly the masters. I mean, for better or
Right.
worse. Hopefully for better, but often, unfortunately, for worse. With bees, there's really a sense that it is a partnership between humans and animals. The bees get benefits because we provide the boxes that shelter them. We make sure bee predators, and there are many bee predators, birds and lizards and so on, are kept away from them. And ideally, we have a relationship where we don't take away all their honey, but we split the honey. So in a sense, you could even see it as the honey that we take is a sort of payment for our protection services for the bees. But the bees can leave at any time.
Right.
We can't. It's really funny. There are all these cases of people trying to control bees, guard bees, prevent them from running away. But ultimately, you can't really stop a swarm from leaving. So, one sense we get from our beekeepers that it's really a relationship almost of equals. Okay, and it's also interesting, if I can digress, because philosophically, many philosophers have been fascinated by beehives because they see in beehives the sort of complex social structures that humans also have.
Right.
With the queens and the drones and the workers and this really complex structure. So there are many philosophers, biologists who have been really fascinated by how and see parallels between bees, the social structures of bees and social structures of humans. So even though they're insects and we're humans, there is a certain sense you get right through human interaction with bees and humans, being in a certain sense a partnership, a sort of appreciation that we don't really have with other animals. So that's one.
Yeah.
And also, and the beekeepers have lots of fascinating customs. Many beekeepers, I mean, in the West, say that you should talk to your bees. You should tell the bees news when something happens in your family, the child is born, there's something development. You should tell the bees because they're neighbors. They're your partners in a sense. And while we're probably exaggerating them, and but it's true that I think most beekeepers have a relationship of a lot of respect with their bees. Also, the fact that the bees can sting you. Um,
Right.
Now, the stinging thing is something people always bring up, and to some extent, that's a bit overdone. I mean, bees don't want to sting you for a very simple reason that when a bee stings you, it dies. When it stings you, it embeds the sting in you, and then it pulls away, it basically disembowels itself. So bees don't want to sting you. Okay, they will only sting you if you are getting too close to the hive to protect the hive, just as
Right.
we protect our homes. And
Right.
so beekeepers have a lot of respect for bees for that reason, and they learn how to approach bees. I mean, obviously, you can do it wearing a PPE sort of like bee suit, but
Hazmat suit.
actually, many beekeepers don't even use that. They just approach. Beekeepers will always tell you, don't make abrupt movements near a hive. You approach a hive carefully. You open it with care. And it's quite fascinating seeing beekeepers take up a bee frame with bees on it, and not get stung. And it's just a question of their movements, how they interact with bees. And it's not a physically demanding job, which is one reason why many women can take to it very easily. Also, unfortunately, our experience with farmers is that it's often hard to get farmers to take beekeeping seriously, especially when we first go to villages. I mean, over
Right.
time, as they see the benefits, they do. But it's not. The problem with beekeeping, in a way, is its part sometimes is actually that it doesn't really require much work. Once you've set up a bee box and you keep a certain, you look, generally keep an eye on the bees, it doesn't really require very much work beyond that. So, because there's not that much involvement, people often forget about the bee boxes. And
So how
and
has so, yeah, so tell
sorry.
me a little bit about that. This whole idea of, farmers are don't take it too seriously, or it's just sort of there. And and
Yeah.
and then and then on the other hand, of course, UTMT has done some great work to show that
So
farm
it
yields
takes
and
time.
income goes up. Yeah.
It
So
takes time, and one of the key elements in this is our bee trainers. UTMT as a whole has developed over the decade a whole cadre of master bee trainers. Often people from that area who are taught about bees, and then in turn educate people about bees. To educate village carpenters how to build bee boxes, because the thing, there's a whole economy around beekeeping. So there are carpenters who have to build the bee boxes, and then we teach people how to capture swarms and look after them. And actually, we found that in many cases, this is something that farmers' wives end up doing very well. In the same way that, for instance, farmers' wives often take care of chicken coops because it's seen as something that doesn't require a lot of effort but is close to the home, and she just keeps an eye on it. So many farmers' wives or daughters, in a few cases, have started taking care of hives and becoming the beekeepers. So we have a number of beekeepers. I think we even have a couple of women master bee trainers who are
That's right.
teaching other people how to do bees. And this is really important because this is one area of rural empowerment which can directly help a lot of rural women.
Right. Now, I just want to circle back to the 500 crore allocation. And what can, I know, you spoke about the kind of the disconnect between what, sort of the single point agenda of the government, which is to,
Yeah,
sort of constantly promote honey. But obviously, on the other hand, you've got, these indigenous bees who can can really help to improve farm
yeah.
livelihoods, which we've proven through the data that that the surveys that UTMT and other organizations have done. So tell me, what is there what would you like to see the government do with this 500 CR allocation? If you were able to kind of lobby or influence the people who are dispersing that money, what would you like to see them? Where would you like to see those resources allocated?
Okay, number one, we need a lot of education about Indian bees, just as we need a lot of education about of Indian breeds of cows. We need a similar sort of education happening about Indian bees, and we need a lot more interaction with one thing people don't understand about our whole agriculture sector is that there is this huge network of agricultural research and scientific establishments. It's a legacy from the British to some extent, which India has really built on over the years. And we have this massive agricultural research establishment. It comes under the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, which has a number of institutes for every possible area of agricultural research. And these institutes have agricultural extension services. And there's a huge amount of knowledge that is captured and disseminated and goes into the government system. Unfortunately, our experience has been is because beekeeping has always been framed in terms of honey production, and which means propagating Apis mellifera, European honeybee.
Right.
This whole agricultural research and education system has just been very resistant to listening to us on the Indian bees. I mean, we have made some progress. Significantly, it's really interesting that we have had some contacts with some of these research scientists after they've retired. And they tell us that, yes, we really appreciate what you're doing. And in some cases, they've come on, they've helped us as advisors. But we need this research establishment to accept the importance of pollination as the primary metric for beekeeping success. And that means you can't say that honey production is going to be how we measure the success of how this 500 crores is spent. What is
Right.
most important is going to be, getting bee boxes out there, getting bee boxes full of live bees, for which you need to have what are called bee nurseries, which help like capture the swarms when they're happening, and help create new bees that can be new bee hives which can be put in bee boxes. So basically, we need a huge amount of emphasis on number one, constructing bee boxes. A lot of money should go just to carpenters in villages, teaching them how to make bee boxes, because there's a certain science that goes in creating a bee box. What we're talking about today is World Bee Day. We started this conversation, and that celebrates the people who've created the first commercial beehives. What was critical in that was understanding something called the bee space. The bee space is within a hive, is just the amount of how wide the corridor between the bee frames needs to be, which the bees will accept as that's being the right space for them to go in and work. And until this was understood, it's a very precise measurement that varies with bee species. But until this was understood, bees just didn't go to the bee boxes because it didn't suit them. Just like we wouldn't go to a flat that didn't meet our requirements. Uh,
Right.
and so we need this knowledge to go out how to construct bee boxes with the right bee space. And this is work that can be give an excellent amount of work given to all these carpenters who have been working in cities in buildings and now going back to their villages. They can now just start making bee boxes. They have the carpentry skills. We just need to give them the templates and the right measurements and get them making bee boxes, because that's the lack of bee boxes is a real constraint. once we have bee boxes, then we can start. We can encourage master bee trainers to go out and start looking for, because there are bees all around us. Serana bees are across India, so you learn how to find Serana strains, Serana swarms, and when the swarms are likely to happen, and how to capture these swarms and persuade them. Because as I said, remember what I said about beekeeping being a partnership
Partnership,
between humans
yes.
and bees. You have to persuade them. You have to invite the bees to come into the boxes, and then maintain them. So there's an
Right.
immense amount of work, which is not a lot. A little bit of money can go a long way. That's what we've learned at UTMT. So imagine the impact that this huge amount of money that the finance minister has given can have if it's properly used in getting
Right.
carpenters. I said all these city carpenters who are going back to the villages need to be trained how to make bee boxes, and this knowledge of how to get the bees into them and cultivate them and appreciate them for the pollination, and as a side effect, the honey is there.
Right. Well, that's a very powerful message, and I hope that that gets sort of percolated upstairs. Maybe there's an article for you right there, Vikram.
Yeah,
I'd like to also ask you a little. You've been with Under the Mango Tree Society since over the past decade, since it was
absolutely.
founded.
Since it started, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you came on board and what that journey was like. And of course, just this in March of 2020, UTMT Society has won a major award. It's a big feather in
Right.
its cap. So tell us a little bit about your history with the organization and also this award that it's just won.
Right. Actually, to be honest, my history with the organization came actually through honey. In Bombay, there is this big food show called the Upper Crust Show.
Yes.
It's run by Upper Crust Magazine, which is
Yeah.
one of India's oldest continuously running food magazines, and they have this
Right.
big food show, which is a tamasha really. Have all these food producers from across India who come and set up a stall, and I always go to it because you always find something interesting. And I think about in 2009 or maybe 2008, I went and there was this lady with a stall, and she had these bottles of honey in front of her, and she was offering free samples, and it seemed interesting. But then she asked me, so she said, "You want to try like the honey?" So she had about 5 or 6 types of honey, and I was like, "Cool, yeah, it's always anybody. It's always nice to eat honey." So she gave me some honey to try, and what was amazing was that every one of the honey she had tasted completely different. I mean, I was used to the sort of commercial honey you get, which is honestly just like sugar syrup, or sometimes you get honey from like the khadi from the khadi gram stores, or you could pick it up in village markets, and that often tastes a little bit more granular and has a bit more flavor, and it's much more interesting. But here there were 5 or 6 different types of honeys from different parts of India, which were radically different. I remember there was one from the Chambal Valley, and that's what was fascinating was once you learned where the honeys came from, you got a sense of the land, of the earth. It was not just something sweet. It was you got a sense of the land it was coming from.
The
So
terroir.
this Chambal Valley terroir, exactly. The Chambal Valley honey was like nothing I'd ever tasted. It was thick and it was creamy and it had all these amazing tastes. And then I remember there was honey from the orange orchards near Nagpur, which again there was floral tasting in a different way. Then there was cashew honey from South India, which was dark and thick tasting, and it was amazing. Every honey was completely different, and that really opened my eyes to what a fascinating product honey is. There are so many different types of honeys, and
Right.
Vijaya told me that her plan was both to start selling these different types of honeys, but also to encourage the people who are producing these honeys. And she set up this really quite unique organization under the mango tree, which is actually 2 organizations, 2 parallel organizations. One is the company which sells honey, which is completely different, and one is the society which you and I are on the board of, which does the beekeeping. And so if you go to a shop, you can go to many shops, especially in Bombay or even here in Goa, where you can get under the mango tree honey. That's from the company, and it's from a number of really amazing different sources. And there is us, which who do the parallel work. And I found this interesting on multiple levels because it was a really interesting way to combine a commercial operation with an NGO operation. And secondly, as I spoke to Vijay over time, I realized that it was not just the honey. It was exactly what we've been speaking about the pollination, about rural livelihoods, and also uh, an emerging understanding of animal rights issues. Because for me, I think how animals are treated within our food systems is clearly becoming one of the most important issues of our time, which is why we're seeing things like the vegan movement is growing in strength. And I respect those perspectives a great deal. And the fact that people are talking about how to reduce animal cruelty is particularly important at a time like this, at a disease which arguably seems to have
Have originated.
originated in some of these markets where animals are incredibly cruelly treated. I mean, the virus that we're all under is a wake up call for how we should treat animals. And for me, bees were really fascinating because, as I said, they seem to be the one animals that we could interact with on a non on an equitable basis, a
Yeah, on a
partnership
global
basis, as I
basis,
said.
right?
Now, I understand that from a strict vegan perspective, you will not have honey because it is from an animal, and I respect those perspectives, and that it is important to see that. But it does seem to me, as we said earlier, that there is a way to see bees as the one animals that we do not kill, we don't have to kill, that we can form a partnership with, and that gives me that seems to me to be a way to consume an animal product in a fair way, and that is really fascinating.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are complexities here because one of the main sources of honey in India is actually from tribal areas, from forests, and that means collecting from Apis dorsata, the rock bees, which usually does involve destroying the hive and killing a significant amount of bees. There are some initiatives to work with traditional honey hunters who have the knowledge of how to smoke out bees, and it doesn't necessarily involve killing the bees, though it does involve damaging the hives. And there are people who are working with tribal communities on that. So tribal this sort of tribal honey is a sort of complicated issue. On the one hand, it's usually sustainable. It's usually ecologically well harvested, and it supports tribal communities who really need the income. But it does involve destroying the bees. So there's a complicated issue of what is acceptable. I think under the mango tree is following a middle path, which is the ideal path, where
Right.
we are not using these sort of imported bees. We are using native bees, which are ecologically sustainable to India, but we're doing them in bee boxes, which allows them to be harvested without killing the bees and without even destroying the hives. And that, to me, as I said, is creating the ideal sort of partnership between humans and animals for a food product.
Right. And this HCL award that was given in March of this
Yeah,
year. Can you tell us a little bit about what that award entailed? And because I do know that Under the Mango Tree Society was the underdog, and
absolutely.
I don't think that
And
Sujana and the team were
Under the
expecting to
mango tree
win.
was up against some pretty big NGOs, with a very long track record of working with rural areas. And people often say, "Oh my God, why are you just looking at bees? There are so many. There's rural hunger and starvation, and food waste, and so many huge issues in rural India to work on. And how can you just work with bees?" And I mean, the answer is that all those issues are important, but sometimes you need to target the micro issues too. And I think
Right.
what Under the Mango Tree does really well is it targets micro issues, and through targeting that, helps deal with the larger issues. And I think the success that we had at HCL shows that judges are able to appreciate the fact that our micro knowledge, our can actually have a much larger impact.
So, Vikram, what can an individual do? I mean, what kind of message can we send out to, just somebody who is thinking about bees in a very cursory manner?
Well, number one, I mean, most people honestly interact with bees through consuming honey. I
Right.
would tell people to look for local Indian sources of honey. One thing people don't realize is that a lot of the honey that is sold through the big commercial brands actually comes from China. Now, I don't want to do China bashing at a time when
Yeah.
everybody's China bashing, but I have to say that there are lots of questions to be raised about the Chinese beekeeping industry. It is like everything in China. There's a lack of transparency. There are definitely questions to be used about antibiotic use in these hives. We have reports of these mass beekeeping operations where sometimes there aren't even plants for the bees to make into honey. So what they're doing is they're feeding bees sugar, which is absurd because basically you're taking one form of
Oh,
sugar and converting it to another
putting
form of
into
sugar
another. Yeah.
simply because through a bee, and that's absurd. I mean, and this honey, which is produced in bulk and is very cheap, is what is being imported into India and is being sold by. I'm not going to name any brands, but the biggest brands that you know in honey are selling this Chinese bee, Chinese honey. And so I think you need to question where the honey you consume is coming from. Uh,
Right.
Not you don't have to buy under the mango tree honey, though under the mango tree honey is fantastic and you should definitely buy it. But there are many other organizations, if you look around, who are producing local honey. As I said, most of that is rock bee honey and is not actually ideal from a vegan perspective. But it does support tribal communities, and you have to make that sort of
Trade-off.
trade-off. So for most people, your entry point is through honey. If you're more interested and if you have a garden, and I think many people are in this sort of lockdown, if you have a garden, are like focusing on their gardens and planting their gardens. And sometimes it doesn't have to be it can be a terrace garden also. We have a couple
Right.
of places in Bombay where we've placed honey hives on terrace gardens. So you can have a terrace garden and you can try and get a beehive. Now, unfortunately, we are under the mango tree really focuses on rural areas. We don't really have a system of helping urban beekeepers. But internationally, this has been a big trend. You can go to a city like New York and you have bees on rooftops in Brooklyn. I mean, urban beekeeping has become a really big thing in cities like New York. And bees are extremely hardy creatures. Even in a city like Bombay or Delhi with all the pollution, there are bees all around us. There are serrana bees, there are florea bees, and above all, there are dorsata, the rock bees. I mean,
Right.
as I said, you can go to if you look, you can go to bridges or big buildings, and you see these gigantic hives dangling from them, like they're dangling from rocks and cliff faces. And as one entomologist once told me, she said that for a bee, a building is like a cliff. They see no difference, and they don't care where they build the hives as long as it's left alone and as long as there are plants around. I mean, the other way I came into beekeeping, actually, and I just remember this, is through a personal experience. I was living in a building in Bandra, and I woke up one morning and I went into my kitchen and found it full of gigantic bees. It was one of the most scary. It was like one of these, disaster movies where you're being attacked by like insects, something. My whole kitchen was full of bees, these huge bees, dorsata bees, which if you've ever seen them closely, are pretty big and scary.
Yeah.
Now, luckily I didn't panic. I switched on the fan, I opened the windows, and as I said, bees don't want to sting you. Okay, they actively don't want to sting you. So if you don't, force a bee to sting you, it won't sting you. So I switched on the fan, I opened the windows, and the bees disappeared. And later on, I realized what happens. Apparently, it's quite common. I mean, basically, the flat, the flat below mine had been empty for a couple of years, and in the absence, a rock beehive had been built up on that veranda over there. Nobody had noticed it. And basically, the bees were swarming. And since my kitchen window was just above, they came into my
Ah,
kitchen
they
window.
came in.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that was fascinating for me because it made me realize that, even in a city as crowded and polluted as Bombay, you have rock bees, these sort of really ancient bees from Indian tradition that, as I said, you can see, depicted in cave paintings, are living in a city like Bombay. And
Right.
that to me shows the resilience of bees. And in a way, it's if it's not silly to say, it's another way like bees are like humans. Like we're resilient, bees are resilient and find ways to live even in a city like Bombay. And
I
uh,
and
you
I,
know
I think
that
Sujana
was my
also,
real introduction to bees.
yeah, and Sujana made a good point. One of the things you can do is plant more flowering plants because that
You
will
can plant more
obviously help
flowering plants,
bees.
absolutely.
But I also want to say that, Under the Mango Tree Society does have a donation page. You can sponsor a bee box for 1,500 rupees,
Absolutely.
which will, or a starter kit of 3,000 rupees, which will help a small farmer improve their farm yield and income. you're welcome to go check it out on the website. And I think these are all very small interventions. We don't even realize 1,500 rupees. I mean, you go out for a meal in Bombay and it's not even that.
Absolutely.
But it can go a long way in, as I mentioned in the introduction, 5,000 to 20,000 rupees on average is the increase in farm income per farming cycle. And that's a lot of money for these small farms. So those are ways in which individuals can support, promoting beekeeping. Vikram, I just want to give you, if you want to make any concluding remarks, but otherwise I'm cognizant of the time and we will, Instagram shuts us off, in about an hour. So I did want to sort of just give you that opportunity to conclude. But thank you. It's been extremely informative.
Just, it's really nice to have been able to do this. I really value the 10 years of experience that I've had with Under the Mango Tree. As you said, I'm a journalist who writes on food issues, and usually journalists don't get involved with people in the organizations that they report on. I mean, Under the Mango Tree is the one time I made an exception simply because I felt their story was really so interesting, and it touched so many areas. As I said, we've talked about them in this talk. Sustainability, rural livelihoods, animal rights. So many issues came together with what Under the Mango Tree was talking about, and it's been fascinating seeing this develop in real life and being able to go to the villages and see the farmers who are beekeepers, actually how they operate the bee boxes, how they extract the honey, and to actually see the products on the shelf. So, I think there is so much that is fascinating about honey that people get involved with. If you have kids, I mean, it's a great way to get kids interested to talk about honey. And honey, as I said, like it did for me, opens up all these areas of sustainability, agriculture, livelihood, and it helps that there's something delicious to eat at the end of it all.
That's a lovely way to conclude. Thank you so much. Here's to World Bee Day. Absolutely. Everyone, maybe go have a bit of honey, even though that's not the only thing bees are about. Thank you so much, Vikram.
Thank you, Gayatri. Bye.
Take care. Bye.